letting us share whatever thoughts we would have here. And thanks to Anna for the wonderful introduction. I hope that we will make this panel as exciting as possible. And I would let three of my panelists present themselves. But the subject of the panel will be Russian investments in Silicon Valley, and how they jive together, and how Russians are learning things from Bay Area, and how Bay Area is probably learning some things from Russia.
So it's listed Peter Ashley from 500 Startups. He couldn't come and asked me to be here on behalf of 500 Startups. I'm a mentor there, not a founder or partner, just a mentor. There is a network of mentors at 500 Startups, and I'm one of them. And 500 Startups is an accelerator incubator, similar to Y Combinator, Angel, Pod, Techstars, and many more. And also it has a fund, seed fund, so it provides both acceleration program where entrepreneurs work for 3 months and are coached by mentors. And in addition, the fund, 500 Startups Fund, could invest up to $200,000 to $250,000 if the startup progresses well in the accelerator. And speaking of myself, I'm originally from Russia, got PhD in theoretical physics in Russia, moved to the US, worked as a physicist at Cornell University and the University of Wisconsin, then quit physics, moved to Silicon Valley, started 3 companies, sold 2 of them, the last one to Google, and that company had development in Russia, and so in Moscow, so it became the seed for Google Russia. I became the first head of development in Moscow, and so we grew Google Russia. I moved back with Google, and now mentoring startups.
My name is Alexey Andreev, and I'm managing director. I'm running West Coast operations for Harrison Harris Group. And Harrison Harris Group, while I speak Russian, we frankly don't have too many things currently going on with Russia. So we're a venture capital firm. We are laser focused on advanced materials and technology investment opportunities. So we tend to be first money in. We have a portfolio of 30 companies, 40% clean tech, 30% life sciences, 30% semiconductors. And while we have some interest, and we did a few explorations here and there on how to work with Russian companies in the most efficient way, the jury's still out. We have a few things going on, but nothing solid to report yet. Personally, I think I'm a second. Okay, so on personal background, I think I'm a second theoretical physicist. Maybe we'll have some more theoretical physicists on the panel.
I hope not.
And also got my PhD, and also spent some time in academia, and then moved through a bunch of private equity venture capital firms, all the way from Russia, moving west, and again ended up as a venture capitalist after Stanford Business School about 10 years ago in the Valley, and have been working for a couple of funds. And so we're actively looking for the new deals. We had 4 liquidity events this year, 2 IPOs, 2 M&As in our portfolio, and we're cautiously optimistic about doing new deals in advanced materials and nanotechnologies. And so we have a lot of, we see quite a lot of talent with Russian roots.
My name is Ilya Golubovich. I'm the managing partner of a group called ITBF Global Ventures. We're a New York, London-based venture capital group focused exclusively on investments in clean tech. We've been around for about 5 years now. We're on our fund 2. Total assets under management is probably a bit over $200 million. So far, we've made about 18 investments in clean tech. Most of them are in the United States, and a lot of those are within 10-mile radius of where we're sitting here today. However, we probably have a bit more exposure to Russian than Harris & Harris in a way that a lot of our LPs are from Russia. And we actually just we're launching a new fund together with VTB Capital, which is the largest investment group investment banking group in Russia, where we have some large corporate Russian LPs, including Rusnano, including the sovereign wealth fund of Kazakhstan called Samruk-Kazyna. We have brought in previously Rusnano into some of our portfolio companies, but that all started about, I would say, a year ago. Before that, we had similarly no exposure to Russia whatsoever, but this year we've gained a lot of experience, so I can probably share some perspectives on working with groups like Rusnano and some of their counterparts like Skolkovo, knowing how to deal with them firsthand at this point.
I'm Pavel. Hi. I've been entrepreneur for pretty much all of my life. I built 3 companies myself. What is now biggest web design company in Russia, what is now second largest online advertising agency in Russia, and what is now largest customer relationship management software company in Russia. I've solved all of them. For the last 4 years, I was doing corporate job. I was head of Adobe. I was executive at Microsoft. I just resigned from Microsoft a month ago. And in the meantime, I was doing investments as a business angel, coming very early from idea or prototype stage, and then helping the company grow through the next phase. So I now have 8 companies in my portfolio, and over the last 4 years, they attracted more than $20 million in funding from larger funds. They employ hundreds of people. And my focus is internet, consumer-related internet, I would say. And anything that would have a good innovative idea behind it that could potentially change the world, but something that you can practically build into a business in 2 to 3 year time frame.
Subject of this panel is something that I hope we would expand a little bit and make it somewhat fun. I'd like to start, since all of us here on the scene are Russians and most of the people here are Russians, I'd like to start by quoting one of Lermontov's famous fun remarks that Russian literature started by emulating the Western literature, the Greek poetry and Byron and many others, and ended up producing actually incredible masterpieces like Pushkin. So likewise, Russians on the internet started by emulating and quite successfully emulating Groupon, Facebook, Google, Yahoo, Quora, and a whole bunch of other American companies. And right now you all heard this strange, very Russian word, Skolkovo, that some of us are still struggling with pronouncing. So the question to the wonderfully distinguished panel would be, and anybody please take that, do you think Russians are moving or are going to be moving beyond just copying, beyond just emulations? Do you think that we soon are to see something really incredible coming out of Russia that is not just a wonderful copy of Facebook, like Vkontakte, but that is something absolutely new and you know, that others would like to emulate? Anyone?
Okay, yeah, I think so. Yes, we are going to see it, and actually we have seen it already. So, for example, chat roulette was born in Russia. It was not a copycat. On the other hand, now there are copycats here in the US. And it's not the only example. There are other ideas born in Russia. Wikimapia probably is another example, which is not doing great, but it's a different story, but it was conceived in Russia. Parallels, Abby, so a bunch of companies that are not copycats. So I think the process is already started and will only accelerate.
I can share my vision. So Ilya Golubovich and myself, we invest in companies which move atoms, not electrons. And it's much harder to move atoms than move electrons, just in general. And in order to do so in any meaningful way, you must have the right manufacturing equipment, you must have the right scalability capabilities. And so the unfortunate reality, at least what we're observing from our standpoint, is Russia, in terms of manufacturing base, inability to build devices, inability to mass reproduce finished goods, whatever the finished goods are, it's never been the strong point for Soviet Union and Russia in general. And in the last, say, 20 years, this culture and this infrastructure has not become better. It's getting worse or staying flat in certain particular verticals. And so whenever you see an innovation coming from Russia, at least in our space, in many cases, it's something incompatible with traditional manufacturing techniques. It's something which cannot be mass-produced using existing foundries in South Pacific Asia, and frankly, everything is today made in South Pacific Asia. And unless you can demonstrate that your innovation is A, better, and B, can be manufactured in volume using known conventional equipment and manufacturing processes, at least in the world of moving atoms, such investment is extremely hard to do, because even if you have a magic device out of the lab, the question is how much it's going to cost once you start producing millions of them, and who's going to fulfill the supply chain for those devices. And today, again, we're a little bit detached from Russian manufacturing capabilities, and I know Rusnano is trying to create a semiconductor expertise cluster in Zelenograd, and there are some efforts to do similar clusters. But at least as of today, as of end of 2011, we don't see ability for Russian companies, even with highly innovative technologies, which require moving atoms again, to be able to launch and mass produce whatever they want to mass produce in Russia. And unfortunately, in many cases, their inventions are not compatible with conventional manufacturing processes which exist in South Pacific Rim countries.
Yeah, unfortunately, most of success stories in Russian venture capital were related to IT. And those technology companies which, for example, went public, which are not IT, which are Russian, they're...
Unfortunate to you, right?
Well, not that unfortunate to us yet, because, I mean, we don't have any Russian investments yet, at least. But it's unfortunate that it makes a lot of people cautious. And the biggest problem, of course, is that it makes entrepreneurs cautious, because you know, they see a Yandex IPO or you know, Odnoklassniki, Mail.ru, and they think, okay, so I can probably try to create my own IT startup and, you know, bootstrap through it and then maybe raise some money. Luckily, there's already many more funds in Russia which are providing venture and seed funding for IT. However, anybody who wants to, for example, come up with a new battery device, let's say kind of have an idea for a new type of anode for, I don't know, a new lithium polymer battery or something. It's impossible to commercialize something like this with a few $100,000, not just in Russia, but even here. And so raising money for these kinds of startups is much more challenging, and seeing the whole path to an exit for a Russian kind of material science or clean tech startup, it's much more challenging, and there were no successful examples of that. So this is very unfortunate indeed. Will we see more of that? I think it will take a lot more time, and Rusnano has been spending, or groups like Rusnano has been spending a lot of money, and I don't necessarily agree with all their investments. The Semiconductor Center in Zelenograd that Alexei has mentioned, I think it's wrong. I don't think it makes any sense to try to build a semiconductor industry in Russia, because we will never get a competitive advantage with the Asian countries. I mean, or even like take Intel. One semiconductor fab by Intel can be $5 to $8 billion to build. Rusnano has only like $10 billion. And the whole kind of innovation budget that the Russian Federation has, so it wouldn't be enough to even build half the capacity that the international players have today. So, but that being said, they are pouring a lot of money in not just semiconductors across the sector. And I was in Skolkovo actually for a venture fair dedicated to clean tech a few weeks ago. And I must say I was very positively surprised at the quality of startups there. And they're doing very early stage kind of seed, Series A kind of stage investments. And some of the companies there I was really surprised by the quality of team, which has improved dramatically. And as I'm sure all of you know, teams, it's what we venture capitalists look at the most. The way they think about the commercialization of their technology, not just looking at the Russian market, but looking outside, the way they look at IP, how to protect it, the way they tell their story even, I was very, very positively impressed, and you could clearly see the progress from 3 years ago. So I think something is happening there, but will we see our own, Russian, purely Russian nanotech, clean tech startups going public and making the news anytime soon? Unfortunately, I don't think so. I think most of what we can hope for is that some technologies are originating in Russia, and then groups like ours helping them migrate here, and maybe help them commercialize here with local teams, maybe some of the teams from Russia. I think we'll see more stories like that in the next 5 years than purely Russian startups going public or having big exits in any other ways.
And could I add a couple of words in defense of cloning or copying? There is nothing wrong with that. That Facebook is a clone of Friendster, Google is a clone of Alta Vista, and you can continue on this line. And in fact, we should not confuse invention with innovation. Innovation, it is by definition inventions that survived implementation. Company, technology, product not necessarily should be completely unique, invented there. It could be further development of something that was developed elsewhere. As long as you do it better than the previous iteration, that is legitimate. And so cloning is fine. Go ahead, clone, but make it better. And yet another example is Nginx, the web server, which is not the first. There was Apache and many other web servers before, but it's done better, and surprisingly by just one dude, Igor Sosoyev, who single-handedly wrote probably the best web server now. That is, Facebook is run on it, and Hulu, and WordPress, and few more. And so, could you call it copying? Okay, please, but that's great copying. Go do more copies like Nginx.
I totally agree with Sergey. I think business is about a path from idea to money. So the shorter this path is, the better is the outcome for investors and the founders. So until there is space to do copycats, people will do this. So assuming that Russian economy has a lag with US, there's always be space for copycats, and most of the talented people and most of the money will go into this sphere. If this gap will increase, then we will see even more copycats. If the gap will shorten, then we probably see more of the really innovative ideas. And in the meantime, I think there are actually a lot of innovative startups coming from Russia, but like take Buddhist, for example. They have a very good innovative idea. They already have copycats here in the US, but I can bet that in 3 years they will talk Russian with an accent, and they will not position themselves as a Russian business anymore. And do you consider that as a Russian innovation or not? That's a big question.
Good points. Building up on that, clearly the very idea behind the SWOT is to make sure that we sort of showcase to each other and also to Silicon Valley. There were lots of, at least yesterday, hopefully today too, non-Russians, so to say, here. And hopefully we all together brought some really nice face of the brilliant, innovative Russian startups here. But the question that's, at least on my mind, and hopefully on minds of other people here, is knowing how much brilliance, not to be too shy, knowing how much brilliance so many Russians possess, and knowing how many brilliant, ideas, engineers, entrepreneurs, business people, startups are coming out of Russia or coming out of Russians living elsewhere, outside of Russia. Would you guys, being investors and being also entrepreneurs, would you guys share at least one story each of a startup, hopefully a Russian startup or Russian-speaking startup, in which you regretted investing or in which you regretted not having invested? So some sort of a horror story or fun story of something, you don't need to name names, of some sort of a situations where you either invested and then it didn't work out, or somehow you regret it and why, or you were going to invest and then for some reason, or maybe you just passed and then you looked back and you felt, oh gee, that was a real start.
I probably need to think a minute for a story, but I must say that as an investor, I missed probably all of the waves when they came. I couldn't get the idea of social networking. I couldn't get the idea of mobile applications. But when you look back, you see that in any moment of time, you have probably 10 or 15 different waves. You can be on each one of them.
Right.
So if investors start to regret about all the investments he didn't make, I mean that's a direct way to a hospital probably.
Really?
Well, as far as IT, I mean, I probably can name a lot of companies there. I mean, being in Russia, there were opportunities to, offered to me personally sometimes even to invest in some of the companies which, Russian internet companies which became very successful. Being very focused on clean tech, I didn't do any of them. And, from a financial standpoint, I think I regret those. But speaking of clean tech, I think I can't really come up with an example of a Russian startup that I regret not investing into. Startups here which had Russians as founders, yeah, I mean, I think there was one very recently we wanted to invest, we just the round closed too fast. We were too slow, I guess. It's a company based down up in San Francisco. They came up with an excellent new technology for OCM coupling of methane, yeah, which has huge applications even outside of the United States, particularly in Russia, which is a huge natural gas market. And yeah, I mean, every once in a while you see something like that you wish you should have invested, but I agree, you shouldn't regret about those. I mean, if you spend your time regretting about things that you didn't put money in, it's indeed a way to a hospital.
Yeah, you're probably right. Although there are a few firms, and our firm is not one of them, but there are a few firms like Bessemer and OPV, and there are a few other guys which on their website they publish their portfolio companies, and they publish anti-portfolio, where they talk about companies they could have invested but decided to pass, and how it happened. And so you need some sort of self-confidence, certain level of self-confidence and humility to do so. But if you go through those anti-stories, so essentially the pattern is always the same. So there is a wave, and early on no one knows if it's the wave or not. And so first 2 or 3 or 4 guys who somehow came up with a certain idea, they're having very hard time fundraising. They're knocking every door, and they're knocking to the same doors over and over and over again. It's very painful. And essentially everyone is saying them no. And if those entrepreneurs are persistent, a few of them will eventually succeed. And so once they succeed, and once whatever they invented, and it goes back to copycats, it's very hard to come up with an original idea and have a successful implementation of this original idea. It's much easier to copy once you know the customers really want it, and there is a need for this product. You just do it better. But the original ideas are very few apart, seriously, in my mind. And so once a couple of guys will get the companies funded and they see the first traction, you have a wave created, and now everyone is jumping to the wave, and the market is getting overpopulated with photovoltaic companies, with battery companies, with Web 2.0 and Yelp clones and Google clones, whatever, the clones. And there's a short period of time where entrepreneurs who recognize the wave can get funding relatively quickly. And then it's normal market supply situation where we have way too many companies in a given particular segment, and signal to noise ratio is all through the roof, and then something becomes out of favor, and the wave collapses. It's a lot of analogies with windsurfing and surfing, and Sergey is a great surfer around on the panel, so he can tell you about waves and where to be behind the wave or front of the wave. And then there is another wave. And so I probably am not one of those people who can recognize the new wave. I don't know any firm, maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions, who are in repetitive fashion demonstrating ability to pick up the new wave of innovation. Everybody else is just trying to be early followers. And we as VCs, we are in a sense hard to invent something new. It's much easier to follow somebody else.
My regret or horror story is rather about entrepreneurship, not investment. And that is, my company launched the first social network in Russia back in, I think, 2004, before Facebook, after Friendster. As soon as I saw Friendster, I instantly realized that it is the next big thing, and we began making a clone in Russia and launched it. Actually, there was even a private label white box version for Ambar called Ambarster. And then I was my main company, Dulance, the search engine, on my hands, and Google began negotiating with us, acquiring the company, and so I couldn't run 2 companies, and it became apparent that I will be joining Google, so you cannot be head of Google Moscow at the same time run a social network. So I began running around Moscow and talking to entrepreneurs there, asking them to take the company, give me some share, but run the company. And everybody is laughing at me. Social network? Ha, 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 ha. What's that? How would you make money? Don't be foolish. Go away. And so nobody took it, and we had to shut it down. And you know that now market valuation of Kontakte is something like $1.5 billion, and Odnoklassniki is probably similar.
those living in the valley probably heard Guy Kawasaki's favorite story maybe 10 times, how he was asked to be the CEO of Yahoo, and he didn't didn't recognize the size of the opportunity, and how he, every time when he talks about it, you can just see that his smile is so bitter, and every time he's estimating the number of billions he would have made. So, but to me, I think it's very important. I think you mentioned, Alexei, the Bessemer anti-portfolio. It's actually incredibly illustrious. They have eBay, Google, Intel, I think Microsoft even, a whole bunch of like incredible, huge companies to which they said no. And they even have pretty nice, I actually recommend it, especially to those of you who are not familiar, those of you coming from Russia, I recommend checking out Bessemer Ventures and anti-portfolio, because they also had enough sense of humor to actually comment, you know, like eBay, haha, funny place where people sell Pez dispensers, yeah, right, stuff like that. So to me, this was an important question, because I think it's very important. I spent many years being an entrepreneur, and I'm really fresh to being an investor. And to me, before I saw the bloody kitchen on which the investors, you know, make the sausages, I only saw the bloody kitchen of entrepreneurs. And just a year ago, I didn't understand this world, which I understand much more right now. And very often, not very often, but most of the time, investors are the side that is asking for something. And, oh, I'm sorry, entrepreneurs are the side, I wish. Entrepreneurs are the side that is asking for something, and the investors are the side that is deciding whether they will or will not give this something to entrepreneurs. And there is always, even in Silicon Valley, with very, very few exceptions like Facebook, there is always some sort of a scarcity of the money of the investors, even though there are thousands and thousands of investors here. And there is some sort of an abundance of startups. So I think it's very important for an investor not necessarily to regret things, not necessarily to end up being in a hospital or being sick or, you know, not sleeping at night, but at least sort of looking back and analyzing things. And speaking of regrets and speaking of analyzing things, my next question, probably the last one, and then we'll ask for the question of the audience. Since all of us are Russians to one extent or another, in one sense or the other, let me ask you, what do you guys feel are the things that you would wish Russian entrepreneurs coming from Russia or entrepreneurs in Russia had, and what are the things that are the most, so sort of doing the, not necessarily the SWOT analysis, but sort of looking at, and making sweeping generalizations, looking at the wonderful and not so wonderful entrepreneurs coming out of Russia. What do you think are the qualities that are the most illustrious, the most incredible, that, again, generalizing, Russians possess? And what are the qualities that you wish they sort of en masse would have more? And again, I realize that this is an overgeneralization. It's not really, you know, you can generalize about Russians, Mongolians, or anybody else, but you feel, do you think that there are certain things that you wish entrepreneurs there had more of? And do you think that there are certain things that they could really be proud of in general?
I mean, it's probably obvious, but I see a lot of issues with sales. With sales as a cultural thing. You know, my parents would still consider me a loser because I never got my PhD. And whenever I would come to my parents and say, I decided to go into sales, you know, they would think of me as a total loser who can't achieve anything in his life rather than selling used cars. And I see this all the time with people. I see this all the time with entrepreneurs. Even when they are good sellers, they sometimes feel uncomfortable admitting this. And I think this comes from all the way from school, maybe even from kindergarten, that you know, being an engineer is good, being a salesman is bad. And I wish this would change from the cultural perspective. This was probably a result of a long history actually burning this out of the nation. And it would really help if this would change. I think it's only the perception thing.
By the way, Pavel is a writer. Maybe some of you know that, and I'm in the middle of reading one of his books, and he actually makes some really great references. So those of you who like to read, talk to him about his books.
What would I like to see more in Russian entrepreneurs? Well, the first thing, I think I would like the Russian entrepreneurs, and again, ignoring IT, not very familiar with that field, but the one thing I've started noticing lately, and that really sometimes pisses me off, I would like Russian entrepreneurs to realize that they're not in Silicon Valley. Because there's a lot of them that are trying to build a business on the Silicon Valley model and, get the venture financing structured like the Silicon Valley funds usually do. And I think what's important for not just the entrepreneurs, but for all the people in the innovative field in Russia to realize that Russia has a fundamentally different economic structure than the United States. Here, 2/3 of the American economy is based on small and medium-sized businesses. That's why the entrepreneurial culture is so strong. That's why we see startups growing from a university dorm to multi-billion-dollar companies, etc. Russia, 3/4 of Russian economy is monopolies and oligopolies, a lot of which are controlled by the government or have a significant government presence. And those are historically the most inefficient kind of structures to adopt innovation. And when you think about it, that's really when, if a Russian government, if Russian people want to create some form of a new innovative industry to gradually migrate from being addicted to the oil needle, as they call it in Russia, I think the innovation must start there, in the Gazproms, in the Lukoils, because it's not happening. And I think unless it starts happening, all the efforts that we, the venture community, incubators are doing, those will not really move a needle.
I don't know. First, I'm not an entrepreneur. I never has been one. And so in my humble opinion, you should be of certain breed or certain mental state to become an entrepreneur. And so I have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs, people who will jump ahead and start something new. And they're not your normal people, they're a little bit crazy. And hopefully they're crazy enough to be entrepreneurs, but they're not too crazy to be dysfunctional. So it's a narrow band in my mind. And so we see entrepreneurs coming from all over the world, and whether they are Americans or they're Europeans or they're Russians, I think entrepreneurs are pretty much the same. They tend to dismiss challenges in front of them, otherwise you just don't start your company. They tend to be overly optimistic, and they tend to be overly optimistic, and so they tend to be very enthusiastic and hardworking people. And I have a lot of respect for this group of individuals, and I know there are plenty of them in this room, so I really have very deep respect. I think that the difference, what we noticed and what I noticed, it goes back to Pavel's comments. Salesmanship is one skill which is mostly missing. I would say the second part which is missing is understanding that whatever you do for the customer. And so the customer support and customer relations are very important. And so you may be on the top of your technological excellency, you may be creating phenomenal fundamental innovations, but if you're not following up with your user, if you're not trying to listen to your user and follow up with somebody in the supply chain next to you, you will most likely be very respected for your technical knowledge, but you will be unsuccessful as a company. And so I don't say it's a Russian special. There are many people coming from Eastern Europe, or even people coming from some South Pacific Asian countries, which don't do the right follow-ups and which are a little bit arrogant to the customers. So you may be arrogant to your investors, you may be arrogant to incumbents, you may be arrogant to a bunch of other people around you, but you cannot be arrogant with your customers. By the end of the day, the purpose of the business is to sell the product and deliver it and make people happy about using it. And so I think most of the Russian entrepreneurs, at least I faced, they have this excessive arrogance toward their customers. It's not Russian only problem, but it's a predominant trait, I say.
Okay, my advice to startup entrepreneurs. By the way, how many people are here who are in startups? Aha. How many people are going to thinking about starting a company? Okay, everybody is already a startupper. Good. So my advice, read chapter 2 of the Dostoevsky's book called Notes from the Dead House, Записки из мертвого дома. And after that, think again if you want to continue or you want to quit and take a real job. Because I think that people don't remember what was in this chapter 2, I'll explain it in short. So this Записки из мертвого дома is Dostoevsky's memoirs of him being in prison camp, Katorga in Siberia. And chapter 2 describes his first day of this hard labor, каторжные работы. And a bunch of prisoners are sent outside of the camp to demolish a house. This is what the work they do somewhere in the city. And so they are slacking. They work slowly. They take long smoking breaks. And they say, oh, the shovels are the wrong size. By the instruction, we are supposed to have bigger shovels. So we will not work until the bosses will give us the proper shovels. And so it's very relaxed work. And at the same time, the prisoners always say to the convoy, to the soldiers who command them, that, well, what if we do the following things, that instead of working from 9 to 5, you'll give us a fixed bid task. So as soon as we finish the work, we go back home, to the prison camp, home, to the prison, but still to relax. And guards say, no, 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 you are supposed to work 9 to 5. And they keep slacking and keep asking for fixed bid. So eventually, the guards say, okay, as soon as you finish this and this task, you go home. After that, everybody jumps up, rolls up the sleeves, and begin working really, really fast. And when one guy was still slacking, they told him, you motherfucker, what are you doing here? We'll beat you up if you don't work hard. And so they finished the task 15 minutes before 5 and happily go home. So, and this is, I think you see the analogy.
I think that was a very interesting quote from Dostoevsky, and you know, I think that also is a perfect conclusion of that part of talking about the very enigmatic, strange, and different Russian psyche. But of course, you know, I hope you all realize that we're, you know, making some sweeping generalizations here, because without sweeping generalizations, sometimes it's impossible to, you know, pass judgments on things. It's also sometimes, as a startup or as an investor, it's also sometimes pretty hard to make decisions without simplifying pretty complex things. And if there is one thing, correct me guys if you disagree, but if there is one thing in which Russians are really good, it's at complications. It's at looking at very complex things, seeing them in very, very complex ways. And it comes with both upsides and downsides. And I also enthusiastically agree that maybe this, especially generational weakness in sales is one of the results of it. But I hope you guys would also agree that the younger generation is doing much, much better in this respect. Almost everybody who is, Russian that I know who's younger, they don't have the same hang-ups we do about sales, about the money, actually. One thing that surprised me, I lived here for 16 years, and I wasn't in Moscow for 13 years, and 3 years ago I went to Moscow. One of the things that surprised me is how money is no longer the неприличный subject. I don't think there is an English equivalent for неприличный. Something not spoken of in a nice society, something that shouldn't be. People just like, hey, so how much is this car? How much are you making? I was like, whoa. So anyway, I think let us open to the questions from the audience. Please either address your questions to the whole panel, or ask anybody individually. And also, like I mentioned before, all of these people present, including myself, are actively, I hope, actively looking for investment. So if anybody feels that you have something that is fitting our profile, please feel free to come to us individually. So please ask your questions.
There's many people who work for Lukoils and so forth, who have many ideas, and they have no way to reach you guys, because they have no idea what startup is, how to raise the money. And if you say due diligence, they don't know what that means to begin with, and that scares a lot of them. How do you tap to that huge pool of talent and resources? And I have a question and an idea for you. What if you employ this idea of microfinancing or microloaning? Give these guys 10, 20 grand. Let them leave the Lukoil. Let them work. Like, he doesn't ask for much, right? And if there was an infrastructure to do that, would you be willing to participate in these finances and maybe create a next eBay, who knows, Google or whatever have you? What do you think of this idea?
I mean, I have an exercise. Whenever I present to an audience of startuppers, I would never have business cards with me. And if people would approach me saying, I can't find information about you to send you my teaser, go screw yourself. It takes you 10 seconds to put my name into Google and find 20 different ways to get in touch with me. This is like a barrier to entry. If you're sitting in a big company and you're comfortable in your job, and somebody is coming to you and asking, please go out and do something, try your startup, he doesn't have the passion to be successful. He will burn this money. He will have a very good excuse why it didn't work, and he will either come for new money or he will say, I failed, but it's not my fault. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for an investor to deal with this kind of people until they're ready internally to be an entrepreneur.
I would agree with that. I mean, all of us here are a Google search away. That's A. And when you're talking about Russia in particular, I mean, those of you sitting with laptops and iPads there, I mean, you can go right now, and I'm not advertising, just to be clear, but just as an example, you can go on the website right now. There's this very simple form where you fill out, you attach your business plan or even an executive summary, depending on what you're capable of writing, and this will get, somebody will look at it. And they are very eager to look at interesting projects, and those which are really credible will potentially get grant financing, even more than $20,000 to $30,000. I mean, some of them getting in hundreds of thousands, even in millions of dollars. And they will eventually come to venture groups like ourselves. So it's much more accessible, I mean, the venture community in Russia than people make it out to be.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe follow up on and ask the question for ourselves. So how about panel question to the panel? And just in general, it partially addresses your question, but what is the drive for innovation is coming from? What is the reason why we're here? Why we are thinking about starting new companies and doing something? And what we see as venture capitalist entrepreneurs, there are several drives. And the driver number one, frankly, at least in Silicon Valley, is not actually money. Money is a secondary for many entrepreneurs, not for everybody, but for many of them. So the main driver is they just don't feel they are appreciated in the company. They don't feel they are valued at the company. They believe they have something which can really address real needs for people, or they cannot live in a corporate environment successfully. So I read a great article the other day on TechCrunch about entrepreneurs are those guys who are not good at existing large corporate environments. They're just orthogonal to existing culture. They cannot get bonuses and promotions at Lukoil. And so they essentially forced, as immune reaction, is forcing them away from large corporations. And the only way they can succeed in doing something in life is to start their own company where they can dictate their own culture. So it's kind of one driver. The second driver is make money, and this driver is very present in Asian entrepreneurs. So you see different people coming with different motivation. Those guys are looking for making buck, and it's totally legitimate reason. So you have third driver. If you are a founder of a company, it may help you to find a girlfriend or boyfriend. It depends. It was a great research on rock musicians. They figure out that normally women prefer more wealthy individuals as their future husbands. But there is one exception. If you're a rock star or a painter, it has the same attraction in the eyes of the opposite sex. And so there are many reasons. And so whenever you are dealing with Lukoil employee, and the Lukoil employee who has been doing what he's doing, kind of drilling for oil or drilling for money to channel them back from the oil, whatever he's good at, the probability of him jumping the ship and doing something else is minimal, in my opinion. And so I would completely agree with Pavel. It's kind of not a relevant question. But looking at yourself as a former entrepreneurs and current entrepreneurs, what is the driver for innovation? What's the driver for innovation for you guys?
Okay. Yeah, actually, I want to give the answer to the question, if you please. So what you are saying, 20,000 to develop early startup, it's called incubator accelerator. And yes, I think it should be created in Russia. A number of one recently appeared there, and more is needed. And 500 startups, which is such an incubator here, is now actively evaluating opportunities of branching out in Russia. Dave McClure, who is the founder and principal partner of 500 startups, is in Moscow today doing exactly that. So, but even if 500 startups doesn't branch out in Moscow, we are still evaluating this. Russian startups are welcome here. There is a bunch of startups from Brazil, Chile, Mexico, whatever, in 500 startups. From Estonia, by the way, too. So Russian startups are welcome, well, if they are admitted, but welcome to apply. Sorry, Ants.
No, it's okay.
I just wanted to answer the direct question.
Yeah, the money available. Money is commodity, and especially for, again, capital-efficient businesses. You can always scratch, or you can sell your Porsche Cayenne or something, and it's enough to build a working prototype of most enterprise consumer software available in the market today. So it's not a problem. I think there is excess of money in Russia for internet projects, frankly, or it may be the case. I don't know. What's your opinion? It looks like everyone is willing to write 50,000 check nowadays.
Let's see what other questions are.
What's the point? If a Russian entrepreneur is building a company that tends to be global, what's the best way to realize his idea? Either to stay in Russia or to move to the Silicon Valley.
Immediately move to Silicon Valley, sell your Porsche Cayenne or leave it to your significant other, And this is the place. This is definitely. I lived in New York for 12 years, and I love New York so much. And there are few things I regret as much as not moving here 16 years ago instead of moving here 3 years ago. I think it was really, really incredibly stupid. And one of my first startups it was Fotki, which probably many of you are users of or were users of. And when you talk to a lot of people and you say Fotki, they're like, what? And then you explain and say, oh, it's like Flickr. You say, yeah, Flickr copied us, and it was 6 years after we started. So it was really stupid. I think you should be here. This is my personal opinion. Maybe you guys would disagree. I think you should be here for many, many reasons. The abundance of entrepreneurs here, the incredible Silicon Valley attitude of go-getting, the great resources you get as far as partners, employees, connections, the incredible investment community, the abundance of large corporations that could be either or large-ish corporations that could be either your distribution channels, your partners, which are very, very open here. You can really, really easily approach people from there. You don't need stupid consultants or smart consultants. You can really do it yourself. Just keep going to events like this and other events. This is the place to do it. Moscow is a great city, but I don't think you... Are you an internet entrepreneur? Yeah, just move.
Well, I tend to disagree. I would say that move, but keep your development team back in Tomsk or Saratov.
Oh, I'm not saying
or something like that, because there is a huge shortage of engineers here in the Silicon Valley. You won't be able to hire anybody. So keep your developers back there, move sales and marketing to the US, to Silicon Valley. That's true. This is the only place.
Just don't bring your developers here for a long time, because they're not going to come back to Tomsk. And I love Siberia. I'm from Siberia.
I learned here a very interesting concept called Israeli model. Israeli model is when it originated from Israel initially, as you can imagine. The idea is you come into US, like being a Russian or Israeli company, you come into US, you establish like a sales office. You probably cannot succeed here against local competition. But even when you get 1–2% market share, you have a local office. First, when you come back to your country, you're already considered an American company, and you're back at home, you're accepted at a much higher level first. And second, even if 90% of your revenues actually come from international markets, but the fact that you're incorporated here, you have a good bullshitters who pretend they are local directors, you have a good chance of being valued at the local valuation and being bought at a local valuation rather than what you can get back in Russia. And there were a lot of companies, and now there's a huge wave of new companies using this model. So I strongly encourage to look at it.
However, before incorporating there, keep in mind that US companies pay taxes on their worldwide income in certain instances. So if the majority of your business, of your sales will be in the US, it's okay to incorporate there. If, however, it will be in Russia, in Europe, in Asia, then probably it pays to incorporate somewhere offshore in Channel Islands or BVI or something like that and have a US subsidiary. This way you will be paying taxes only on your US income. That's you cannot avoid, of course. But it's kind of stupid to pay US taxes on sales that you make in China or Chile or Germany.
Any tax attorneys or accountants here? No? Oh!
That will be my next panel, so we'll cover all of this.
So talk to Alexei, he will. It's definitely worthwhile to, I totally agree with Sergey, it's definitely worthwhile to at least talk to a tax attorney or an accountant that will save you an enormous amount of money.
Yeah, so there are stories of companies who incorporated in the US for vanity, that they wanted to be US company, And then when they were selling those companies, it costed them like 20 million, 40 million in US taxes, because when in certain transactions, when you sell the company, it's income and it's taxed, and the tax rate in the US corporate tax rate is like 55%. So think about it twice.
How many Russian startups you personally funded to date? And this is not startups you tag into and looking at the documents. Tell me how many startups you wired money, they left your bank account, and they arrived under benevolent governments of Russian government and Russian banking system. How you guys mitigate, or what's the practical solutions you've seen of actually funding Russian startup, but having your equity in the startup protected? Because like here you write convertible note and you know it's American system. And the only thing we know about Russian equity is that like Khodorkovsky stock options today I think are underwater and has very low residual value. So how you structure the process as American investor, what you actually fund? Do you fund the entity you incorporate here? And that's a hard condition to fund Russian startup, or there is some safe way to buy Russian startup equity? So share some practical notes how you actually do that. But tell how many startups you funded first.
Can you count Ukrainian?
Yes.
2.
I had about 15.
Wow.
Wow.
8 of them are alive. And I can actually share with you the Russian version of the convertible loan agreement, which we developed with some lawyers in Russia, so that there is a good protection for you as an investor.
I would suggest don't share it with me, just put it on Amber website for everybody to download.
Yeah, actually.
Welcome to Silicon Valley. We all share
about
here.
that, yes.
Welcome to Silicon Valley, where sharing is caring. That would be really, really nice in the airport, right?
Out of the city of Irkutsk. It's towards the Chinese border, for those of you unfamiliar with the Russian geography. Eventually sold the technology to Japanese and wrote off the Russian investment. But I see your point. I mean, indeed, a lot of the financing structures, legal structures that we're used to here or in Western Europe, in our Western European investments, are harder, not impossible, harder to implement in Russia. And we're, as I mentioned before, we're launching a specifically designated Russian fund with together First Nano and VTB next quarter. And we thought a lot about those issues, how we're going to replicate the structures that we're conventionally used to. And there are ways to do it. I'm not sure I'm in the freedom of sharing our corporate documentation, but we actually were surprised. But of course, as far as risks go, yeah, I mean, administrative risks in Russia are way higher than it's here. Corporate governance is way more difficult. Protection of minority shareholder rights is legislation is at embryonic stage, even though the Prime Minister has promised on multiple occasions that they will work on it. I guess we're still working on it, and we're hoping it's going to improve, but we're not getting our hopes up. But then again, I think there's significant amount of experience at this point among both law firms and Russian venture funds in funding mostly IT startups that can then be applied to other industries as well.
Yeah, for us the number is 0, but we funded 3 companies here started by Russian CTOs and technical founders. So we will not touch Russian jurisdiction.
Yeah, so my advice is also to have a Western company like BVI or the US, and all the intellectual property should be there, and all the upside should be there, all your main shareholders is there, and then you have a Russian subsidiary, wholly owned subsidiary of that Western entity that basically employs developers and that's it. So all the employee stock options, restricted shares, everything is in this Western entity. And essentially, your Russian entity only pays salaries and collects grants from Skolkovo, RVC, and Rosnano.
But if you're very early stage, like if you're two guys from Bryansk, opening a U.S. entity would be a pain for you.
Impossible.
Just, yeah, I mean, you probably. I mean, I wouldn't fund. If I give, let's say, $20,000 to a project and they need to come up with a prototype, every dollar out of this money counts to make sure that there is value for the customer.
For that value, that's probably right.
I would not invest in a team that would say, out of my first $20,000, I will pay $3,000 for incorporation and legal fees.
True.
All right. Anybody else? Any other? Okay. Let me conclude and thank the panelists for the very deep, sometimes very unexpected forays into Dostoevsky and into the accounting and into the very enigmatic art of funding Russian startups. But my conclusion would be, I would say, almost needless to say, the huge majority of people present here are Russians from, former Soviet Union, maybe not just Russia, but there are certain things that unite us, and I think among us is this really incredible drive. And I think that's what actually makes this country so great. That's one of the reasons I'm here, because people with incredible drive come here. So as much as I love Russia, my proposition to anybody is move here. Thank you very much.